millions of jobs, super high paying. There's this like one job post from Anthropic that was like a 350 or 375K job post that got circulated numerous times and
Okay.
get stretched out. Podcasts are
Yeah,
very
yeah.
athletic. All right, welcome back to Axiom Alpha. This is Arnab, my long-term friend from grad school.
And
Um,
sweetheart.
oh, and sweetheart, yes. We met and fell in love in a CS class that I was auditing and he was taking. I was in the math PhD program at Duke. He was in the CS PhD program at Duke. We
Mhm.
both left our PhD programs to join a legal tech startup. And then Arnab went on to go work in the fashion industry and operations. And now he's working on a stealth AI startup. You have anything to add to your introduction? Do you want to add any self acclamations or anything to make yourself seem even
Sure.
cooler? Did
Yeah.
I make you seem cool enough?
No, it's not about seeming cool enough. It's like
Just being cool.
employers are lining outside, and
Start bringing in,
uh,
acquisition offers already for the startup.
yeah, it's actually if you guys want to acquire us, like we're more than happy to. Like we do not have a product ready yet, but the idea is enough for like an idea and this somebody who worked less than 2 years in it or like less than 3 years in industry. That's the kind of track record you should go for.
We'll
Anyway,
leave your email in the bio so people can
yeah, yeah.
reach out with their offers.
Yes, sir.
Final offers
But
only.
yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I want to talk about prompt engineering. I
Hmm.
find it kind of funny that there is a lot of discussion about prompt engineering going on right now, and most of it is non-technical. So going back like a year, that's pre-Chat GPT launch, there
Hmm.
are articles that are written using the phrase prompt engineering in a technical sense or a somewhat technical sense. And now post-Chat GPT, it seems like the term has basically been co-opted by the popular zeitgeist and turned into an equivalent to writing prompts that give you what you want. So not
Hmm.
really engineering, not really software engineering. Um, it sort of
Hmm.
feels like to me the same thing as like calling writing an article or a book like word engineering. Like I'm book engineering, I'm article engineering. Like sure, you could call writing engineering of sentences, but it's a little deceptive. It's not quite what you normally think of when you think of engineering.
No, but that's actually true. There's a process to that too. Like, right, for example, like Stephen King, the writer, he says that, right? There's a process to write, like and then people have actually outlined, oh, this is how you put together the story, this is how you abstractly think of it, and then you put the plot together, and then you seemingly like bring all of those together to craft the entire novel or whatnot. So
True.
I feel like I get the same feeling when I do these things. Like I am expecting some output behavior, and I'm gradually shaping a conversation with another semi-smart human, or like not human, but like a semi-smart agent, and I'm trying to understand what appeals to them, so as to elicit or bring out some certain output from them. But in a human or real life sense, it's kind of like, oh, what do I write, what's my target audience, and how do I shape a narrative in order to elicit some emotions, like writers do. So I kind of agree with that portrayal of yours.
Yeah, so I think you're right. There is obviously something to, actually how do you write a good book? How do you write a good article? I'm not sure it's mm, I mean, maybe it's just that the term engineering, maybe it's just, the STEM background in me that feels like it's being reduced a little bit. So it's not necessarily engineering as much as, any process is engineering. Like you could call interacting with humans engineering, social engineering. That's a
Social
phrase,
engineering.
but that's a
Yeah.
little bit different than like engineering a software system or building a piece of hardware. Um, and I'm curious because I think a lot of people are latching onto this as a way to say, oh, things are going to be okay for humans. Like, oh yeah, large language models, text to image models, text to video models, they're going to take over a lot of jobs. A lot of people are going to not, that what they used to do was just going to be automated, 50% to or 100% away. And so,
Hmm.
but not to worry, prompt engineering is here to save us. We'll all become prompt engineers. There's going to be a massive demand for prompt engineering, millions of jobs, super high paying. There's this like one job post from Anthropic that was like a 350 or 375K job post that got circulated numerous times and different every media outlet essentially saying, look at this, companies are hiring, you know, such ridiculous salaries for prompt engineers. You could be at the forefront of this. So, first of all, let's talk about what that job actually is. And then, second of all, let's talk about what other companies are looking for in terms of jobs that sometimes use the term prompt engineering. And sometimes, you know, what they really mean is like someone to help them use AI models, figure out ways to use it, as well as what type of prompt engineering is going to be here to stay for at least, you know, let's say a few years, right? If you're going to invest in a new skill,
Yep.
then it would be nice to know that the skill you're investing in is not going to be something that's outdated 6 months from now. Have you looked at the Anthropic job post or prompt
No,
engineering
I
jobs
did
like as a
not. I
service?
actually also looked at the publicized version. But if you can share what the job entails, let's try to dissect.
Okay,
Um,
so I'll put this up on screen so our viewers can see, but I'll read it to you. So
mhm.
at the start of this, we have prompt engineer and librarian is one job here in California from Anthropic. Um, and representative projects are discover, test, and document best practices for a wide range of tasks relevant to our customers, build up a library of high-quality prompts or prompt chains to accomplish a variety of tasks, with an easy guide to help users search for the one that meets their needs. Build a set of tutorials and interactive tools that teach the art of prompt engineering to our customers. Work with large enterprise customers on their prompting strategies. You may be a good fit if you have at least a high-level familiarity with the architecture and operation of large language models, are an excellent communicator and love teaching technical concepts and creating high-quality documentation that helps out others, are excited to talk to motivated customers and help solve their problems, have a creative hacker spirit and love solving puzzles, have at least basic programming skills and would be comfortable writing small Python programs, have an organizational mindset and enjoy building teams from the ground up. You think holistically and can proactively identify the needs of an organization, make ambiguous problems clear and identify core principles that can translate across scenarios, have a passion for making powerful technology safe and societally beneficial. You anticipate unforeseen risks, model out scenarios, and provide actionable guidance to internal stakeholders. You think creatively about the risks and benefits of new technologies, and think beyond past checklists and playbooks. You stay up to date and informed by taking an active interest in emerging research and industry trends. So it sounds like a very approachable job. I think it may be understating things a little bit, and the expected salary range is $280,000 to $375,000.
Sure. Where is this job being floated,
This is
by the way?
Anthropic, so you know one of OpenAI's big competitors.
Yeah. No, no, I have heard of them. That was meant to be a joke that I
Yeah.
would apply for. Yeah. But
I almost
anyhow.
wonder if this is just PR, right? Like they're gonna pay one job, you know, they're like, okay, we'll pay out 300K for one job, but so many
Mm.
people are gonna circulate the story of this job that will get
Yeah,
a
so
ton of
it's more
free
of a
media
marketing
coverage.
gimmick, I think. I think it's more of a marketing gimmick. Like one job they float, and which goes for like 250K, 350K, and people are all of a sudden like, oh, we will now train ourselves for prompt engineering, and now all of a sudden you have this whole marketplace, and other organizations are going like, oh my God, what's this new thing? Like I overheard from a colleague that there are people in fashion. They are thinking of how let's use GPT to summarize, and I'm like, what are we summarizing for fashion? And then as well, textual processing. I could not quite understand. So I think it's more sort of like you light a fire, and then you make it and then you signal to the world that, you know what, this is interesting stuff, let's invest in this. I think it's a PR thing.
I actually think it's a
It's
super smart PR thing too, because one, it gets Anthropic's name out there. Everybody's talking about OpenAI, and nobody's really talking about Anthropic unless they're deeper into the weeds. Prompt
mm,
engineering job is not for people who are that deep in the weeds. Like it seems like a more approachable job than like someone who's been an AI researcher for years. So
mm,
it gets more people who are less technical to know
mm,
about Anthropic. Also, like you said, it puts out there that hey, there are these jobs, and it's going to make other companies think about, wait, should we be looking for prompt engineers? And then if that, even
Mhm.
if some small fraction of those companies end up hiring prompt engineers, then that a fraction of those are going to use Anthropic, so it sort of increases the potential user base for Anthropic. It also motivates people to learn about prompting, and a small fraction of those people will use Anthropic to learn about it, since Anthropic is the one that posted this job. So it's kind
Mhm.
of brilliant. Like, how much,
Yep.
like, are they creating a market and marketing themselves specifically as a company with this one job post?
So, okay, then I mean, I completely get your point. So my question to you is to the way OpenAI was all of the developments that were marketed and were the way they were released. Do you think and in my mind it's not all that much different from how the Series and the Google Assistants work. The LLMs have been in there. There have been function calls that have happened. Like basically what they do is you say something, your utterance is converted into text, and then the text is used to route it to different services. How is that different from the OpenAI chat GPT plugin common combo that we have? Like that combination, how
Hmm.
is that different from like a Google Assistant, which knows that okay, when somebody is looking for some food, let's pull up all of the restaurants nearby and personalize it to the liking and taste of this individual.
I think it's
Like
different just because of what it is that, the structure is not different. Like, you have an interface reaching out to third-party services. The difference is that, what's the interface? I would argue that Siri is a relatively stupid model versus a large language model is much more
no, no,
capable of
but Siri
understanding
is
you.
powered by LLMs.
But not the same level of LLM as our, like, massive,
Sure.
100 to a trillion parameter, uh, GPT-3, GPT-4, Bard, etc. I think it's just the
But
size, right? Like, this, the size of the sophistication of the models. The models are more capable, so it's just like, yeah, I could have a text to speech that model that takes what I say, generates an answer in language, and runs a third party service. But if the sentence that it generates in response is not that relevant to me, then it doesn't do me much good, right? Sort of like saying, like, old Yahoo search versus Google search. Like, they're structurally the same, right? They both reach out to find third party links, but the algorithm that decides the
sure.
ranking of those links is way better for Google than it was for Yahoo. So I think it's just that, right? It's not that the structure of, like, oh, plugins are so revolutionary, like, that's a brilliant idea. It's like, no, it's an obvious idea. It's just plugged into a much more brilliant interface.
No, that I agree with, and as well, once I do not know if I so would so much as call this thing the like I mean AI was there for a long time, but like this they in exposing the combination of GPT, these LLMs and the plugins, like I was they have democratized this space a little bit, meaning like if all of this was in house, nobody would make plugins for your ecosystem, right? They are in some sense creating an ecosystem.
They're
Like
totally creating
Siri
an
is.
ecosystem. Yeah, I think it's going to be a quite a large ecosystem too, because they are, I mean,
And what do you mean by like? Do you see this as being a competitor to the Play stores and the Play
I think
stores
it
that we
easily
have?
could be. Yes, I think there's an unknown for me as to the competitive landscape. So I think there's a very fast evolving race between OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, other players to build language models. You sent me the paper a couple days ago of this interesting architecture that was like 2,000 times smaller, um,
Mm,
and so that's a pretty interesting development, right? Like, if you can compress these large language models by more efficient use of data, better curated data, slightly more sophisticated architecture, and make it 2,000 times smaller, well, then you can go from, potentially 100 billion parameters to 1 billion, or, 100 million.
mm,
Like,
yep.
that's a that's a pretty impressive drop, and that makes it way more accessible, also way cheaper to train models potentially. There's also
Mhm.
another paper, I don't know if you saw this, from a while back, that was a while back, meaning like probably 2 weeks. Things move crazy fast in the AI space. Feels like a ancient history. But there was this interesting paper about sort of like infinitely scaling the context size, and you had this iteratively compressed context that allowed you to access the any relevant parts of a super huge context. So it actually used BERT, I think, and used built a BERT model. This is for people not in the AI world or the software engineering world. BERT was like a large language model from years ago. I think BERT came
Mhm.
out in 2019,
Prior to that, but yeah, it was a
2018.
more sort of an LSTM or bidirectional transformer. Sorry, not LSTM. But yeah, it was prior to that. I think even in
I would consider it
27.
like one of the sort of granddaddies of the modern large language models. Like it was the first. It
That's true.
achieved a lot of metrics that like made it gain more popularity and more round within the software engineering world. But it was much smaller.
I
It only
think
had
BERT is
its context
good.
size,
Good.
I think, was like 512 tokens, which is
512.
roughly 400 words. And
Yep.
now, OpenAI's large language model, so ChatGPT, GPT-4, right? By default, they have an 8,000 uh, token context, which is about 6,000 words. And there's a larger
Mm.
version, which has 32K context, which is about 26, 28,000 words. So back, compared to 400. So it's way smaller. BERT was way smaller, but it still did some
Mm.
interesting things. And this paper from a couple weeks ago took a BERT model and scaled up its context size to over, I think it's like roughly 2 million tokens.
All right.
And it
Okay.
and it did like remarkably well. So I think the paper is
Mhm.
called like, something colon scaling large language models to 1 million tokens and beyond.
Oh, yeah, I do see that. Interesting.
Yeah, so you
Um,
take an advance like that, which is context scaling. You take an advance like the paper you sent me the other day of like scaling down the number of parameters by orders of magnitude, and I think that makes the competitive landscape even bigger. So for me, I don't know if the lead that OpenAI has is necessarily means it's the winner, but I do think there's like one or more large language models will basically have like app store level platforms where you have plugins that
No,
you can
then
reach out
there's
to.
this other aspect to there too, right? Like the folks that who are coming up with these models, they can create their own marketplace because Google is probably the folks who are already on there. Like I saw Instacart on there, I saw a couple others. Wolfram was there, so these are probably already using their Azure, and they are like, oh, by the way, you can also integrate with our OpenAI ChatGPT based interactive model that we have, and you can have your own plugin, by the way. So that way they have access to those clients, and they are just extending that for somebody for a newcomer. Like let's say you and I, if even if we are to train this BERT model, where will we get that sort of like clientele?
So
Uh,
I'm not saying
to,
so I'm not saying that everybody is going to I don't know what the outcome of the LLM war is, right? Like I think there's probably going to be multiple LLMs. Maybe there's sort of like an aggregator of aggregators type architecture where you have one that becomes very prevalent for people to interact with primarily, sort of like a Siri, and then you have specialists off of that.
Hmm.
There's Harvey AI, which is an interesting one that's trained on legal and tax stuff. It's like
I
aimed
saw,
for,
I saw.
yeah. So Harvey AI is supposed to be this like they have very big ambitions. They're starting with law. They're working with lawyers. They have some big law firms that have already signed up to be customers. And then they want to expand into tax and into consulting and professional services. So Harvey II is a super interesting company to look at if you haven't heard of it before. But I
No,
think
I
there
did.
will be specialists probably like that, which are domain specific trained. If there's ever an AI that's built for academic mathematicians, that would definitely be its own specific use case. But I think, yeah, so I think there will be multiple large language models. I don't know about like a primary one, right? It could be that there's like one, like ChatGPT or otherwise, that people tend to use, sort of like we use Google by default as our search engine. But and sort of in that race, I don't know if OpenAI wins or if Google wins or Microsoft wins or somebody else wins, Anthropic wins, or if we
Hmm.
end up, actually with still having like a duopoly or a triopoly where you have three, a few big players. But I think, apart from that, there will be a bunch of other companies that just build plugins for these large language models. And essentially, that will be like the race to build apps. But I also want to circle back to the prompt engineering. So, in terms of writing prompts for these large language models, that job post, right, from Anthropic, do you think there's anything to that other than PR? It seems like they're basically saying, hey, we want to educate people. Going back to the list of things they said, basically discover, test, document best practices for a wide range of tasks relevant to our customers, and build up a library of prompts and prompt chains, build a set of tutorials and interactive tools that teach the art of prompting to our customers. So it sounds like this is basically like a high-tech customer service / sales role. Like,
I
I
know.
am going to educate people about what they can do. If you if you ever built your own company, or if you've ever been in sales, then one of the really great ways to sell things is through webinars. And if you are a software engineer, you may not realize this, but a very popular sales funnel is to basically host a webinar. So, which a webinar is just old language for like a recorded Zoom meeting, basically. you
Sure.
you have a video meeting for an hour, 2 hours. You go into depth talking about some topic, and then afterwards, you have a call to action. You ask people if they want, another like an ebook, or to sign up for a newsletter, or if they just want to buy something from you, if you just go for the direct sale. But it's a very popular way of selling stuff. So to me, right, build a set of tutorials is also in that same realm.
I think so.
Marketing funnels are often educational, either a webinar or a series of articles. So it's sort of like combining like a salesy aspect with a customer support aspect in terms of building up best practices, building prompts, building a library that helps our customers. So it's like, yeah, talk to our customers, work with our large enterprise customers on their prompting strategies. It's just this
Mhm.
sort of like large, part sales, part customer service, part consultant job that requires some level of technical knowledge. How common do you think jobs like this are
I
going to be?
This was on, I mean, on target. And because I do not know if you have if you read this, but Bain had this collaboration, I do not know, collaboration or partnership with OpenAI, like pretty early on, meaning like and this is like dated like two months. And they had this interaction with them there with OpenAI, and they are like, you know what, we are going to bring our clients and help them make use of your of the GPT or the generative AI paradigm that you have out there for people to use. And then we are going to attune the technology to each of our clients' use cases. And they had a thesis there that it's going to help all of their clients in many of those the research that they do, especially for each client, like very many different clients in very many different sectors. So there is that consultant aspect to it, but I think you meant it in a different sense, right? Like when you say, "Oh, it's a sales role or consultant role," what do you mean by that? Like,
No,
do you
so I
mean?
think that's a very good analogy, right? I think that probably it's somewhat similar to the things that Bain was doing, because that last bullet point on that job, work with our large enterprise customers to on their prompting strategies. That could be the same job description for a consultant working at Bain or McKinsey, right? Like, hey, these large
Mhm.
companies are trying to figure out how to use AI models. Talk to them, figure out what they're trying to do, help them build prompts, help them build a library of high quality prompts and prompt chains to accomplish their tasks, help them build out documentation and best practices on how to use these tools. So I do actually think that there's going to be a lot of need for this for some amount of time. I wonder what are the most useful
So
areas.
let's read what Bain has there, in that Bain Times OpenAI, the page I see there. And
It
they
just
this
so
is what
tell us, when is this from?
this is from February 21st. It's OpenAI times Bain, and I'll
From 2023?
drop. 2023. And I see there, like, they have three heads there that, we are going to use OpenAI in retail banks, telco, utility companies, or marketing or financial services. And I think they have pretty much outlined there what you just alluded to, that for retail, we are going to improve customer experience, contact centers that support sales and service agents with automated, personalized, and real-time scripts. So that was one that you specified. Marketing, we are helping lead product and service marketeers better reach their customers by using ChatGPT and DALI for personalized ad copy, rich imagery, and targeted messaging. And financial services, automating client dialogue, financial literature analysis, and generating digital communications. So, and then with that, they'll boost financial advisors'
So
productivity and
let's
responsiveness.
focus on that last one for a minute, because I think that's an interesting one to bring up. One of the issues that I am concerned about. So
Mm,
I think there's going to be a need for prompt engineering if in this definition, right? Like you talk to these big companies and a variety of companies, small companies, like everybody's trying to figure out how to use AI to benefit them. So
mm,
there is an opportunity to teach those companies how to use it and to help them build sort of simple systems, meaning like just literally prompts and prompt chains and documentation for how to use stuff in their business. But so that article is from February of this year.
yep.
When was Bloomberg GPT launched?
Bloomberg GPT, I think it was early last month that they
Right,
came up
and
with
then there's
this.
also another one, Fin something,
Really?
Finio or something like that. But that has been trained on a bunch of 10Ks and SEC
Mm.
filings, financial statements, as well as, Harvey has ambitions to enter the space. So,
In
right, a few
fact,
months ago, you had this thing like say, hey, we're going to help companies analyze financial statements. And then you have a bunch of models that are being trained to do that from scratch, or they're just having, models that are built, they're either fine tuned on it, they're trained from the get go on it, or they're just using prompts that are, coded up once. And then you don't need someone to keep building them again and again because you've already built the system that gives it the context, gives it a chain of thought or something like that that it can then
mm,
use to process things, and you don't need that prompt engineer anymore. So what types of prompt engineering are going to be needed, at least a year from now, versus what are the things that are highly susceptible to being replaced soon?
um, so today I was talking to somebody right before we were right before our call, and then the person there was talking about how he is collaborating with in financial institutions, and all of them know what their use cases are. More so, they have a sense of how, and then these are all financial services company, banks, investment banks. But what they do, what they do not know is how do you use those, like you have n different services first. How do you use them in tandem to create like in financial services, there's not one person doing preparing a report, right? There are n
Right.
different things that come together. They do not know how to have, like, and then a couple of days back I had this chameleon that I sent to you, right? They are trying to figure out, okay, how can we combine different set of prompts to accomplish one task? Can we automate all of that? And so that is not going to go away. If you scroll to the bottom of this page and that I just sent, we need to have a sense of, like, our prompt engineers are still going to be there who are going to design that sort of Markov chain that you see there. If you the for the link that I dropped there, if you go to the bottom, you'll see that that sort of chain is, like, you need to know how to design those. Like, how are you going to use n different prompts or n different different chain of thought prompt or whatever from prompting technique for whatever services, and how do you, like, piece them together to accomplish one task? In my mind, for example, they have that science question answering there, science QA. That's one task, and somebody smart figured out how to put them together to accomplish a good job of science question answers. So I think for every task there will be somebody who is needed to piece all of the different prompting techniques together. And obviously, for you also need people who, I mean, the other aspect what the person was talking about is data security, right? You can have the same n different clients and all of their data aggregated, and then fine tune one model and call it fin gpt, right?
Right.
That is violation of, like, I mean, I am not that well, uh, I am not that knowledgeable about like what regulatory issues that might bump into. But like, imagine that you are Barclays and you are like, oh, I my prompt engineers have figured out something about what JP Morgan was doing because their data was used to fine tune this model.
Maybe
That's sort.
we need like a no code for large language models,
I
basically.
think so.
Because
I
if you're
think so.
building, like, that's sort of what you're describing, I think would be
Yep.
like the optimal solution. Because like right now you have LangChain, you have some
That's
software
too
tools which
technical.
are,
That's too
it is
technical.
it is too technical, right? It's not what people think of when they think of prompt engineering. They think of
Yep.
writing natural language. And what you're describing right now, I don't think there's anything that lets you do that in a totally non-technical way, right? Like I'm trying to piece together different softwares. I'm gonna have to use something. For some tasks, I can do that, right? Maybe I can use Zapier. I can pull in data sources that way, and then, but still, I need to like maybe loop through something. You know, I need a
Hmm.
little bit of programmatic juice in there. So
Hmm.
it's not entirely just about writing prompts, which I think that's
Hmm.
important to realize if you're trying to learn this as a new skill. Just learning how to write prompts is not going to let you take advantage of those opportunities.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's not going to be very long before there's like a no code platform. You know, maybe there even are. I got to Google it
Yep.
after this and see
Yep.
if I can
Yep.
find
That's what I was
something
thinking.
because
Yeah.
I haven't seen any, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. I think in April there were like 10,000 plus new AI tools that were launched. So it's a very fast pace of innovation. It's impossible to keep up with the pace of everything.
True. True, true, true. I mean, generative AI has been there for quite a long time. And when I started working 2017-ish, this space was almost like people who they were actually motivated by questions like, oh, can generative AI, because they are generating something, do they understand the domain itself? There were like so many aspects to it. But today, the way
They
the
don't.
generative AI is evolving, it's so different from the original intent of the area, right? Like, think of the, like, why generative AI became something. So
It's like an X-Men where they start off at the beginning of the movie and they're like, you know, evolution, it traveled for long periods of time, nothing changes, and then all of a sudden there's a mutation and evolution leaps forward.
that's true. That's essentially what's happening.
But also,
But
I
I mean,
think it's interestingly that if you have like a domain of technical expertise and you probe ChatGPT a little bit, you can see that it does not actually understand the domain. At least not. It doesn't seem like it actually does because I showed you this screenshot yesterday, and I'll put it up on the screen so everybody can see it. But this was an example that I put in yesterday. So I was looking at this Google research article from a year ago that
yeah.
had this example of how to use chain of thought prompting. And I was trying to recreate it. So I used the Google research example almost verbatim, and ChatGPT solved it without needing chain of thought. So I made it a little bit more complicated with a little bit more steps needed. So I tried first with a physics example, and it failed both times. It failed without the chain of thought prompting and with the chain of thought prompting. You
Hmm.
know, whether or not you explained step by step how to do it, it still did not do it well. That's what chain of thought means. It's essentially like
Right,
telling
right.
it step by step instead of just asking it for the answer.
Yep.
So I literally told it the equation for this kinematic equation. I told it the value of g, the acceleration due to gravity, and it
Mm.
changed the equation. It still used the same equation it had before, which was it got a negative sign wrong. Like it assumed that g
Oh,
was positive, and so it had a negative in its initial equation, and then it used a g that was negative. So it should have known because I told it not to do that. Like I told it the equation to use and the value of g to use. The equation was positive, the g was negative. It would have worked out, and it did not. So that's an interesting thing. Like it gets these like just simple things wrong. Like I give it an equation, I give it a value, and it's like, nope, I'm going to disregard that. And then the other example that I sent you, which was even more hilarious, was this simple word task of just taking the last letter of each word and concatenating those letters. And I gave it a sanity check, and it told me that the sanity check failed, but that
I
it was
saw.
okay because because the prompt didn't specifically ask.
I saw that. Yeah, that was
That I think is the most is that's probably the best
that
thing that
was.
I've seen ChatGPT output.
He was so convinced.
The
Actually, yeah.
sanity check
I
would
mean, do
not
you have
pass,
that
but
pulled
that's
up?
okay.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, that's actually the sentiment it had. That's right. Yeah.
so clearly, there's
But
a little bit of lack of understanding of domain there. We haven't quite nailed it because I
no,
don't
so
think
but
even like a like a 100 IQ normal average human would
yeah.
understand those instructions. And yet ChatGPT did not, even though ChatGPT beats humans on other metrics. So
So here's a question for you. Then, I there are four axes. That's how I think of ChatGPT. One is it is a knowledge retrieval engine, right? Information retrieval engine. It fairly well understands like semantics, meaning if I ask of it Shakespeare, it's not going to give me back physics. It has a good sense of English language, meaning it gives you proper grammatical sentences. And the fourth aspect is that it in I mean, granted, these are, and then you just gave us a physics example. It was not able to, but it is able to think about and process basic math, basic, like very preliminary middle school level math problems. So, where do you think that logical understanding to solve a math problem comes from? I have been
I
thinking
would
about
argue I
that.
don't think it's that good at solving logical problems. I think it right it's trained on a bunch of human language and programs, right? It's trained on a bunch of Stack Overflow, so a bunch of computer code,
Mhm,
and it's predicting gaps, it's predicting output, like fill in the blank. So I think it learns the patterns of logic that are commonly written in human language, but
mhm.
it clearly is not reasoning per se as much as like the physics example, right? Like it
Yep.
output that equation because that's the equation that is written commonly, right? Like this
Mhm,
negative sign issue.
mhm.
When this equation is written down, it's often written with a minus sign, and G is often written with a minus sign. So you have to, in a physics book, it'll be written correctly. It'll be consistent. Either the G will be negative or the equation will be negative, but not both. But
Right.
there's enough places on the internet that clearly, when you see it, most of the time the G is going to have a negative sign, and most of the time the equation is going to have a negative sign because it's just annoying like that. So it's not reasoning about the fact that I told it to use a certain equation. It's not reasoning about the fact that if you use both of those, for example, on not in this particular problem because I had this cannonball launch from a ledge. But if you use
Mhm,
that same equation on a different problem, you'll get a t, which I also tried, you'll get a t which is negative. And so that doesn't make
mhm,
any sense. If I ask, hey, I shoot this cannonball into the air, at what time, how long does it take for it to hit the ground? The time shouldn't be negative. So
mhm.
clearly there's a misunderstanding if ChatGPT is going to willingly giving me a negative answer. So it's
So, I
not,
mean,
it's,
so
yeah.
you're saying that these models are not have no sense of like no logical interpretability. Like, for example, if why is it doing so well in LSAT, let's say, like those
So,
exams?
so GPT-4 I think is better, right, than ChatGPT. Um,
Sure. Hmm.
I think I think they're maybe like one step of thought, right? Like humans think in terms of like maybe this is it, and then maybe this is it, right? Which the chain of thought is supposed to be getting it to like think in terms of steps, but I think really what you need is something more like Auto GPT, which is take a problem, break it into sub problems, work on one step at a time. Like humans, our brains are probabilistic. Like we decompose things into small chunks, and like if you were a kid, you remember at some point being annoyed that the teacher asked you to explain your work. So it's sort of like that, right? Like ChatGPT is just
And the
jumping
other
to
way
the
around.
answer. Like it's like a kid saying like, here's what the answer is. Like, what do you mean explain my work? It's just is what it is. Like that's the answer.
Yeah.
It's a one step process. I think
Yeah.
that's basically like how you should think about GPT is like it's just this one step process kid. So you
Hmm.
can try to,
Yeah.
if you want it to decompose, you have to sort of like, at least as of right now, you have to give it the decomposition of like, do this step, right? And the
Hmm.
same, when you're teaching that kid how to explain their work, the teacher's going to tell them like steps to take, right? Here's how we decompose the problem. And then they can explain their answer in those decomposed steps. So
Sure.
if you can decompose a problem into smaller steps and then have a GPT-4 solve each step individually, right, then I think it can reason through pretty complex tasks. It'll still come into its
No, actually,
context limit.
that's not true, because the problem that we were talking about yesterday, the string manipulation problem, I actually tried breaking it down, meaning like, okay,
I did as
let's do
well.
it for one
Okay,
string.
let me interrupt you. I have a hypothesis for this.
Okay.
So ChatGPT, GPT-4, these are trained on a specific vocabulary, and it's not the English vocabulary. It's a vocabulary of tokens. So it doesn't
Okay.
per se understand the alphabet. It does, in a sense, but it's not really understanding the alphabet. Like it understands things in terms of, a few 10,000. I can't remember. Most language models are either somewhere between like 30,000 and 300,000 tokens as their vocabulary. So a token is basically like a chunk of a word, like a root of a
Mhm.
word or a prefix of a word, something like that. So it's basically trained on word chunks. Like as far as GPT is concerned, basically language consists of these word chunks. It's not constructed from letters. So letter questions are a little bit unnatural for it. GPT-4 is better at this than GPT-3, but it's still unnatural for it because it's not really trained on an
Mhm.
alphabet. It's trained on a vocabulary, and it sort of treats these chunks of words as these atomic things. So then you're asking it to like decompose its atomic things and then understand what's going on. And so it's like I feel like that could be part of the issue here.
That is actually true. Tokenization is such an important thing. Then I was looking at a blog article where they said, let's complete this, like the DOM, like we have one, let's say an HTML tag slash a, and then HTTP colon, and then it could fill out anything, right? Google.com or whatnot. So it missed the colon backslash backslash, because in its vocabulary, and however, like in all of the instances that it saw in the past, HTTPS or HTTP colon backslash backslash, they occur together. And so
Right.
when you gave it only the colon, it was not able to produce the two backslashes. And so which is why I kind of understand that the atomic thing that you were talking about, that each atom, if they have not been exposed to, like for example, G, what does G mean to it? G is probably does not mean anything, like how it's meant to be, acceleration due to gravity, right? To it might mean something very different.
It means G equals negative 9.8. Like that's just probably like the only place it sees G, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
as a
yeah, yeah,
variable.
yeah.
It's just like that is what it is. That G always equals negative
Not
9.8. I don't know
negative.
what you mean. Like G is not a symbol. G equals
Yeah,
negative 9.8 is the symbol.
that's actually, yeah, yeah. So again, it's like it will not be able to think more than two hops or three hops or three chains of thought processes to get to a conclusion, but maybe one step. And maybe LSAT is that kind of an exam, or did the exams that it's doing well.
Yeah,
um
if you asked, I think if you rephrased all of the LSAT questions in symbolic logic, I don't think it would
hmm,
do well at all. I think it's doing well because of
hmm,
how it's represented.
I see. No, I
I
am
actually want
I
to test that now. I'm gonna go to the playground and try giving it LSAT questions in symbolic logic instead of in natural
well,
language.
that and all of the people who come here will bid you farewell. um
Now, importantly, unlike most videos on YouTube, Axiom Alpha videos are not actually free. I work for you, putting hours of research into each video, and each video costs 0.99 like button hits, which most people round up to 1 button hit. Now, this is a gentleman's understanding, since you're on the other side of the screen, so obviously I can't check that you've paid the price of 0.99 like button hits, but that's why it's called the gentleman's agreement. We rely on the honor system. So please, remember to abide by that agreement. Everyone's doing it. And if you're feeling generous, subscribe button hits are great tax-deductible tips.